They hollered out the window, "Move it, nigger!" And I was like, wow, really? Most homes were broken up. Everybody was running around on drugs. Well, see kids eating some of the most impoverished foods, a bag of Cheetos with some cheese because they're looking for some substance to fill their belly. Why is that even available at 7 o'clock in the morning? Who would even serve that to a child? You might as well give them a beer.
My name is Cindy. I live here in Chino Hills. Maybe you might recognize the flies, but anyways, live in Chino Hills. I'm married. I have 5 wonderful children that I've worked really hard at being productive members of society. So I just like to introduce myself to you, and yeah. I'm working at Trader Joe's and I sub for the school district. Once I got my bachelor's degree, I was able to land that job, which is not a career, it's a job for right now until I can get my kids on their path, and then I can go back and do a master's and then actually finally land that career. Well, my current hobbies that I have right now is I love cycling. I up to 30 miles, at least I did that once. I don't know if that considers like an hobby, but on average I'll ride like 10 to 20 miles, so that's my hobby. I do love cycling. I also enjoy collecting really eclectic weird stuff, if that makes any sense. You know, I love pictures, I love nostalgic stuff, so anything that's bright and colorful. I love collecting art, etc. Repertoire of music, that's kind of in my collection of things that I just kind of like to gathered that just kind of embodies how I feel as an individual. One of my biggest hobbies aside from cycling is definitely cooking. I love cooking, and the reason why I love cooking is because if anyone who knows me really, really knows that I love eating. So there's only one thing I love more than cooking, which is eating. Thus, causing me to learn how to cook. So through my travels and just even going to visit places, I've always enjoyed coming back to recreate it. I find for myself personally a richness in culture, and one of the greatest richnesses that I see, and that might be my own made up word, but that I see in cultures is food. My religion is Christian. Can be complex in a lot of ways because just the way society may look at it, but for me it's just my personal relationship. So I call it religion, but it's my personal lifestyle that I have, where I have a relationship with Jesus Christ as my personal savior. That's who I love, that's who I try to model my life after, and that's where I'm in a constant state of progression that I don't see an end to. My childhood looks like it initially started out with mom and dad in the home with one brother. So it was just I don't know, they call it like a nuclear family. But that changed rather quickly. Parents divorced, custody battle back and forth, ultimately landing with our mom, who kind of carried us all the way up to adulthood. The neighborhood we grew up in was in the city of Long Beach, primarily. Once again, we were a nuclear family, and I actually remember during that time where all the kids would cluster at each other's house, or be outside and play. Everybody, all the parents knew each other. If you were ever acting up at one house, the parents can make that phone call and to your parents, and it was just a sense of community. The ice cream truck, everyone would go out and have ice cream. It was just thinking about it, it was a really awesome childhood memory how it started. And we stayed in Long Beach primarily for the rest of our life. And, things definitely changed when drugs came on the scene. It was like in the 80s when crack epidemic hit this inner cities. And it just really got really, really bad. Most families broke up. Most homes were broken up. Everybody was running around on drugs. Kids were unattended. And it was just a beyond chaotic time at that time. And I don't want to sound cliche with like, oh, crack hit the neighborhood in the 80s. But I am living witness of seeing that crack hit the neighborhood right in our own community and home. So yeah, it was a really tumultuous time. And it was just, like I said, the biggest thing is once we went from that harmonious community and now you have like kids following in, like your kids, friends you used to play with, now they're following in their parents' footsteps. Now they're using drugs and you're like, dude, we were just playing jump rope or riding big wheels, and now so you really see how it just devastated even like the future generations to come, because they were already starting to follow in these footsteps of this bad example of getting hooked on drugs. I would definitely describe my school life in elementary as a person that was very outgoing. And I think a lot of times, in looking back in hindsight, a lot of that may have been like a security, kind of like wear yourself out front so no one can kind of penetrate, so I believe it kind of built up to be like a defense mechanism, like be the loudest. And I mean, not in a rude way, but it was just kind of like, it was kind of like a shield that kind of guarded me, only because with having this, as we talked about, drugs hit the neighborhood and hit in my own home, it left me with a lot of insecurities. So I think that kind of helped be a security for me, like a platform to kind of get ahead of it, get ahead of anything that negative was coming my way. I was like going to get ahead of it by being outgoing and being ahead of, just everything. So it kind of forced me to have to be more in tune of everything, as opposed to some kids can just be completely worried about their Hello Kitty stickers on their backpack. But it's like I had to be worried about my surroundings, what's gonna be like when I go home, and just facing the whole insecurities of it all. How is that? What's gonna happen if something penetrates me, as far as my insecurities or the security that I did have was shaken, especially since it was already on like not stable ground. So it's just kind of put me in a situation having to be on guard all the time at such a young age. I think it was, really different. It wasn't that much. It was still predominantly white, I would say. The elementary school, no, it wasn't predominantly. It was a lot more white than they are now. Junior high was a lot more diverse. Like it started becoming way more diverse. Like I was actually a phenomenon at that point, because it was people were still like asking, what are you? Like, what are you mixed with? What are you? And I had to like constantly be asked that. I've never been a celebrity, but if I ever was a celebrity, I feel like this is how celebrities would feel when they're constantly bombarded with the same question over and over. So you just get this tagline answer, black, white, Spanish, French, Irish, and Indian just rolled off my tongue, because I always had to explain what I was, because being a person of mixed race was like it was just becoming a thing. Middle school became to be really, really diverse. Hispanic immigration started to get really popular. Mixed races started to get really popular or become a thing. It depends on how you want to look at it. And then high school definitely went back to division, especially the high school that our junior high fed into definitely was predominantly brown and black.
Gotcha. So when you went to high school, that there was more minorities, or there were more white people, or it just completely divided?
When I went to high school, the high school that we attended was predominantly white.
Gotcha. Because you had made the transfer.
The high school that I went to was predominantly white because we chose to be bussed out of our neighborhood into a completely different neighborhood. So yes, it was predominantly white. Junior high is definitely when I recognized that I was something different, or being of mixed race was something different. There's not one particular time. I just remember literally all of my junior high experience as people are coming together. You're leaving the comfort of your elementary and now you're coming into this little independence of being in junior high. So now you're not as guarded by your parents, which my story is completely different anyways, because we walk to school, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. A lot of kids walk to school, but junior high for sure is just that point in my life to where I recognize the issue of race, when I was constantly asked by everyone, what are you? What are you mixed with? Are you mixed? What are you? What are you? And that question was like an echoing question all the time. Like almost everybody in the school had to get to the point to where each one had to individually ask. And then a lot of girls would say like, they'd want to touch my hair and they'd be like, oh, you've got that good hair. You've got that pretty hair. And I'm just like, knowing the hassles I had to deal with it, like I never put my hair on a pedestal. I've been rocking the same ponytail for going on 40 something years now. So whatever, but that was an issue. You seen that it was a big deal how my hair was. Also, a lot of the guys who always made a big deal. Oh, you're light skinned. Like that was just something that was so new and so intriguing. So that's where I would say when you hit junior high and everyone's starting to discover themselves and explore is when the issue of race really came about, because now they're getting to a point when they're discovering themselves. It's like now they're like, well, what are you? Because you're different and your hair is different and your skin is light. And, so it was just that whole period of junior high is when that really came an issue, or I recognized it. I honestly didn't really know how to respond to it, because the reality is, it's what you have, it's what you're born with, so you don't know anything different. It's not like, oh my gosh, girl, you got to try this new product, it changed my hair. It's not like I went from straight hair to like, oh, I found the perfect perm, it works, and the whole no, it is what I've always had, so I've never knew anything different, so I didn't really know how to respond. It's almost like somebody telling you, when I was a child, they would say, oh, happy birthday, and I say, oh, happy birthday to you. Like, you don't really know how to respond. I didn't know how to respond. It was just kind of like, it just kind of makes you start to recognize the whole race issue. Like, now I can look back and recognize that it was how it brought attention to like race being an issue. Back then in the midst of it, I couldn't recognize it. So going into high school, the group that we took with us was predominantly people of color, and predominantly out of that group of people of color were Black. But we did have some Filipinos that came and some Hispanics that came, but the majority of the group were the Black students who just wanted something different. And once we got into high school, I've always pushed the boundaries, or put myself in situations to allow myself to be uncomfortable for the sake of growth. And that's a huge key. That's really a huge key. I don't know what provoked me to do that. I honestly feel that it could be my multi-ethnicity that pushes me to do that, or allows me to have the comfortability to push the boundaries and not put myself in a box that, oh, I can only be with this group or I can only be with that group. But when I got into high school, I still held strong to my solid group of friends. I identify myself as African American, although I am multi-ethnic. But at the same token, when society tells you, there's this one drop rule. If you got one drop of Black in you, you're Black. Well, guess what? Then I'll roll with it. Then I'm Black. I identify myself with being Black, although I am multi-ethnic. But high school was really awesome because it gave me that opportunity to explore all the different ethnicities, all the different abilities. Like, I mean, I would just love being friends with, people that were handicapped, people who just of every ethnicity, people from different religious backgrounds. I just kind of had a whole field to explore, and I turned over everything that I possibly can turn over in exploring that. The first time I personally experienced racism is, I would say, I was in high school at this point, and I mean, I won't speculate on exactly what I can't remember, but I can only imagine that it had happened, and I may have not recognized it. But when I actually recognized it is when I was in high school, getting off the school bus one day, walking home in the city of Long Beach, and as I'm crossing the street, which I'm in the crosswalks on the green light. And as I'm crossing, here's two white guys in a pickup truck, and I know I'm not making that up, but they hollered out the window, "Move it, nigger!" And I was like, "Wow, really?" That's what I thought to myself. And once again, kind of like the hair question, like, "Oh, you have nice hair," and I didn't know how to respond. Once again, I'm in this situation where I'm like, almost like, are they even talking to me? Like, because I had never experienced that before. And as I'm looking around, I recognize they're blatantly talking to me. And so I thought to myself, I'm just like, wow, really? So it really was just very confusing at that time. Because like I said, I had known it exists, but that was the first time I ever experienced it. So I guess when I looked around and didn't see anyone else in the crosswalk, it was evident they clearly are talking to me. And I was like, wow. So I just kind of like, wow, you really just experienced that blatantly. So just kind of met me at a place of like, where I just was more confused on even how to respond to it. Or even, it wasn't even necessary to really merit a response, but I was just kind of like, wow, just shocking. I don't think that one particular experience changed my entire perspective. I think at that point, being in high school, I already started developing a sense of consciousness of racism being a real thing, just with what my friends had experienced, just with living as a Black person and seeing people, it still really exists to, guard theirself when you come around, don't look at you in the face, don't speak to you. You can speak to them just as chipper as a freaking bird at 7 a.m. or even a rooster that you might hear in the background. You speak to them and they blatantly stone face you. And now as I'm older, I recognize, honestly, you can't assume that it's all racist. Maybe they just are going through something. But for the most part, these are the experiences that I've had. So I won't say that one particular incident changed it. I already think I was already starting to develop a level of consciousness of this racism and already started to be an activist for myself as well as like people of color. We were told they were going to bring the ASVAB test to the school. So that's the test to see if you can go into the military. So every high school student is given an opportunity to take it for free. So me and my group of friends, once again, I did have a tight group of friends that came from the same junior high. I led the way to say, hey, we're going to go take this ASVAB test because, you have to be an advocate for yourself. Opportunities don't come to you. And especially if you're a person of color, in our experience, you have to get out there and find these things yourself. So anyways, in that time to go take the ASVAB test, we all happened to sit. There was 2 rows of tables, I would say 10 on each side. We were sitting on one side about in the middle. And when they went to pass out the ASVAB test, they passed out the ASVAB test to every single person in the cafeteria except our table. This is no joke. And our table was all Blacks. And we're like, I had to go up and say, hey, we didn't get any. And I was told we ran out. And we said, well, how ironic that you run out on our table. So if you started from the front, the back tables should be the ones that run out. Or if you start in the back, the front tables should be where you run out. How do you run out in the middle, exactly where we are? So I led the charge to go off campus. We went to a local friend's house who lived near the school, and we called the news, and I told them what happened. And the news called the school, and they called us back and said, oh, okay, we're going to reissue the test. But that was another blatant thing, that it's like, this is high school. It's like, whether we decide to go into the military or not, which most people of color do go into the military because that's their only way out a lot of the times. But to be robbed of that opportunity was not cool. So that was another big experience when it came to being blatantly racially discriminated against. And another thing I would like to say about high school, another time that I really felt racially discriminated against was when I was struggling in math, and my school counselor told me, oh, this is in 10th grade. Oh, well, you don't have to take math anymore. Well, I flew out of there like a cat in water, but she didn't ever tell me, but if you plan to go to college, you're going to have to pick up where you left off. And when I look back on it, I'm really bothered by that, because I feel that she herself determined she's not going to college. I don't know why she would make that assumption. I feel like it's safe to assume that it is because that I was black. And I know you look statistic wise, blacks generally do have a lower percentage of going to college. But maybe because of counselors like that could be part of the problem. You know what I mean? Because I feel like she personally determined she's not going to college. But for me, it would have changed my whole course. I would have probably said, you know what, then let me buckle down with it, because I've been a person that I want to have the option, whether I choose to go or not. I want to have don't put me under the ball when you tell me, oh, you don't have to take math anymore. And it's almost like you're not invested in me. You're not invested in seeing me do better, and you're the school counselor who's guidance counselor. And I'm like, this is terrible guidance. I hate to see if I was really in a serious situation, but on a positive note, when it came to the issue of race, we did have two phenomenal counselors there at the time, Mrs. Price and Mr. McGee, who were African-American administrators at the school. They right away recognized a need to create something positive for us to do at that school, and they carved out a place for us. They started an organization or opened a chapter of Young Black Scholars, which for one started to change our trajectory, just to even give us that title, Young Black Scholars. We weren't Young Black Thugs, or we were Young Black Scholars. That kind of started to give us that sense of pride. We did a lot of community events. We'd go to the local elementary school, read to the kids. Like, we want the same like anybody else. You know what I mean? We want, we want to feel like we're making a difference. We want to feel like we're contributing. We want to feel not just an empty sense of it, but through our works, we want to make a difference, So that was a positive note. We did plays that emphasize the kings and queens of Africa, because as we've talked before, but for others, when you give kids something positive to look to, as far as their ancestor goes, and they see themselves reflected, it gives them hope. And it gives them an opportunity to have positive role models and examples of people that they can assimilate with and identify with, that can possibly change the trajectory of their life. But you just tell some black kids, oh yeah, your ancestors were slaves. You think how many people are going to be running back to the plantation and be like, oh shoot, let me go pick some cotton. No, you don't aspire to do that. Let me go work 46 hours in a day. No, you don't aspire to do that. You know what I mean? So those are some phenomenal things. Learning about the kings and queens of Africa, learning about the contributions that your African ancestors have made. And like I said, I'm multi-ethnic. I'm across the whole spectrum. We didn't sell boats. I mean, all this world's blood is flowing through me. You know what I mean? So, but it's like, you cannot degrade one group of people. You know what I mean? Just like everyone else in the world is great. You guys were just slaves. and still treating us like those 3/5, So anyway. Young Black Scholars did introduce way more than we had ever been exposed to as far as the positive contributions of African Americans. And I do believe that if it wasn't for a group like that, that pointed me in that direction, then yes, according to what was being taught in school, I can clearly remember to this day me sitting in history class and completely checking out. In history, all European, obviously more than Christopher Columbus, but just, discovering America and all the grandeur of the Europeans. So that's, at that point, my mind was like, I don't see myself reflected anywhere in here in any kind of positive note. And that literally caused my mind to just shut down. Like, I would really give it a try because my goal is to pass the history class, and my goal is to actually, learn something. If nothing else, at least pass the class so I can graduate. I know in high school I won't act like I'm just was trying to go for valedictorian or anything, but my goal was to at least graduate high school. So I was invested enough to give it a chance, but I can clearly remember being infused with just all this information on European, and just put on this high pedestal where you're over here bending down with a baby on your back, picking cotton 2 hours after giving birth. It just turned me completely off. So yeah, I do feel that if it hadn't been for an organization like Young Black Scholars to start to instill some of the positive influences and contributions, that is all that we would have been exposed to, because only as of now, mind you, I went to school in the 90s, only as of now are they starting, which it's even being threatened, but they're starting to introduce the concepts of having a more diverse history of America as opposed to the status quo, what's been going for the past 100 years. Living in the city of Long Beach in a very impoverished neighborhood, I mean, it couldn't be any more impoverished. And living in the heart of that really opened our eyes to see the inequality firsthand. I mean, in front of the front row. I mean, we were front seat, okay? And this is why I'm so compassionate about being an advocate for, people of color, because I seen firsthand. I mean, I can give you at least 100 examples of the inequalities that happen in impoverished neighborhoods as compared to where I'm at, right now in Chino Hills, which is just such a stark contrast. So, without going too far into depth, you just see so much poverty. You see so much lack of even a garden. I have a garden in my backyard now. Thank God. Praise be to God for that. But when you're in these impoverished inner cities and the schools only have about a 10 by 10 foot patch of grass that the instructional aides are instructed to make sure the kids stay off, and the school system are treated like the kids are treated like prisoners in the school system, which I have witnessed firsthand. The kids aren't greeted with a good morning, good morning Tom, good morning Jenny, whatever. They're greeted with, you got your shirt tucked in, pants pulled up, uniform on, okay, go in the class. You're like, so I pulled my kids out of that school, out of that particular school district, and I moved them to a neighboring school district where the principal would be out in the front with a bubble wand. Good morning. Like, it's a huge difference on how to start your day than a freaking prison pat down when you're in elementary and junior high. You have to stand to be guarded by the teacher to see, uniform, shirt tucked in, what, okay, go in. Like, there was a time that we would say good morning to kids. Like, that plays on these kids' psyches. And if you don't think that doesn't have an effect, try all the, try all the fast food places that's open for the kids on their way to school. I would see kids eating some of the most impoverished foods, a bag of Cheetos with some cheese because they're looking for some substance to fill their belly. Why is that even available at 7 o'clock in the morning? Who would even serve that to a child? You might as well give them a beer. I'm a firsthand witness of the inequalities due to systemic racism, so many different things that I've mentioned in my personal experience that could have very easily not even derailed me, because first you have to even be on the rails, but just cover up the tracks where you can't even find the rails, So, and my more recent experience with racism, it's just, I guess for me, it's kind of easy to say it's so blatant because it's all day, every day. But I'll explain what I mean, because for me it's blatant because I'm a person of color. So yet even still, I have people that I will speak to because I'm a very outgoing person that will blatantly respond to you, but the look on their face shows that they have such disdain. Like I'll respond because I'm in public and I kind of have to, but I don't really want to, and that's okay. Not everybody has to give you a, jolly old day, back to you when you give them a jolly old day too. I get it. But, these are one of the examples of the blatant racism that still exists, is that when we can't even be humane to each other. Like, I'm not asking for a jolly old day and a blood sample. I'm just, giving a general greeting, and to expect one back sometimes can seem like you're putting a burden on someone. So that's what I still experience to this day. My kids, being of African American descent, their father is African American, constantly come home every day with one racial encounter after another, whether it's just someone being rude and not giving you respect if you're shopping in an aisle, blatantly cutting in front of you, just not showing any respect to you as a person is a firsthand affront to being racist when they don't value you, because of it. It just ironically happens to keep happening to us. And the thing we have in common is that we are people of color. So that's why it's blatant, but for a more specific example, we were in the grocery store, getting ready to check out. My husband was about to check out, so he was walking ahead of me while I was still looking for some last things. He was waiting in line behind a woman who was clearly had a lot of things she was purchasing, so he was giving her space to do that. So he was standing far enough back, waiting for his turn, and then as he's waiting, a white guy comes up behind him, and a checker comes out of nowhere and says, "Excuse me, sir, I'll take you over here." And he took him over there and opened the register and took him. And right afterwards, I started to walk up, and another cashier came up and was like, "Ma'am, I'll take you over here." All the while, this black man that was standing to go next had two people that were behind him offered to open a register for them, but neither one of them seen him. And he's not hidden behind the impulse shelf. He's tall and obvious that he's standing there waiting to go next. So I informed the second cashier who approached me. I said, "I'm actually with him." So when I went to my husband and I asked him, I said, "Oh no," he says, "Yeah, they just asked they asked this other guy to go, and now they asked you to go. They never even asked me to go." And then the cashier who asked me, he came to back for me, or back for us for that matter. And then I asked him, because I didn't want to just let it go. And I just asked him, just as much as I'm having this conversation with you right now, I'm just wondering, how come you guys didn't ask him to go? I said, there was two cashiers, one on the left and you that asked other people, how come you guys didn't ask him? And with the blankest stare, he just looked away and looked for like 3 seconds and looked back and asked me, "Huh?" Like he really didn't know. So this day I said, I'm going to press the issue a little bit more. And I repeated the question, how come you guys didn't ask him? I said he was clear that he was waiting to go next. The lady still had quite a bit of stuff. It's not like they were finishing, but you usually take the person that goes next. And he literally just looked at me with the most dumbfounded look. He looked away and he looked back and just said, huh? And I'm just like, couldn't believe that this is really happening. And what he didn't even recognize, because he was of Asian descent, but what he didn't recognize is that he's practicing what's called a racial bias. He's, just presumed that white people's time, or people of lighter complexion, because my husband's a dark-skinned African American, their time is more valuable, and that's how we took it. And then we went into, immediately following that trip, we went into another store, and once again, my husband's waiting to get food. He's waiting to go next in line. They don't even greet him when he walks in the door. Soon as I walk in, welcome to, whatever food establishment, and they don't even greet him. And he stands out, and not as a threat, but he's just a tall, African-American guy. So it's just ironic that these two instances literally happen back to back in one day. And at that point, we're like, you know what? This is enough. Let's just go back home, and it shouldn't have to be that way. We shouldn't have to, hide in the house because of the color of our skin. Going in the whole branch of law enforcement, there's whole different factors that you have to teach your kids, because when you see there's so much, the word disproportionate has been thrown around like a freaking ping pong ball all year, but when you have cultural groups that's being discriminated against, statistics will show far more with people of color, with higher arrest rates, higher, you have to definitely train your kids to walk that line even finer than any other ethnic group. And the thing is, especially as you can see now, that every instance weighs so much more with black kids, because a black kid, getting suspended for having marijuana at school is can make a difference of whether it's justified or not to kneel on your neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Because he smoked weed in high school. He got suspended back in. Okay, so then it's justified. You know what I mean? So it's like it carries so much more weight. You know what I mean? So it's crucial. There's definitely double standards that have to be taught to our kids because of the reason, or because of what statistics show. So, I'll give you one example. When we were at the Lakewood Mall parking lot, and Barrett locked his keys in his car, and he has a Ford pickup truck that has this little slide-in window, and we could see the keys on the seat, and all we have to do is pop this one little click to slide the window and get his keys out. Well, we're doing that and we're not even thinking about it. And then the police roll up and he goes, he questions us what we're doing. We're like, oh, we locked the keys in. It was evident that, to him, that yes, this could be something so simple, but he advised us, you have to be mindful of what this looks like. Which makes sense, but it didn't dawn on us, but it was just kind of like, here's another lesson. We have to make sure that we walk that line even straighter, because of these reasons. It's just, we're presumed guilty before innocent, because society just has generally, painted us all with one black stroke: fear. I've really been wrestling with that question a lot, and that's the journey that I'm on right now, really wrestling with, what is going to be, what can be the solution. My number one takeaway that I've been able to resolve so far, and this is mine, I'm about to copyright it, education is the equalizer. I'm not saying that because we're educated, it means that it's automatically going to bring equality as far as how we're treated, but it'll bring us on the same platform, to where at this point, when you choose to discriminate over one race over the other, now you're going to be forced to just say, I'd rather have a white face be the face of my brand. Then that's fine. I can accept that. I don't have to agree with it, but guess what? If it's your business, that's what you can do. We have laws against that, but at the end of the day, if this is your business, and that's, but that's going to have to be brought to the forefront. It's just that I don't want a black person representing my business. I'd rather have a white person. Then you have to say it for what it is, but it'll eradicate all the other excuses. Well, this person's a little more qualified. No, same degree. No, same education level. No, same amount of experience. No, same community service. No, So when I say education is the equalizer, that's what I mean when I say that. It starts with caring. 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 There's a lady, I'll quote her. Her name is Cleo Wade. And she says, you want to change the world? Right? You got some people who have an ambition that they want to change the world in some way, a big way, a small way. You want to change the world? You have to start by caring. You can't ignore it away. That's the problem. But it's going to have to be, you're going to have to care enough to go through a cultural identity journey. And those are not my words. Those are words from a book that I'm reading, but I like how he put it. Within that cultural identity journey, you'll be able to learn who you are. Once you're able to learn who you are, learn what your ethnicity. No, you're not white. That's a color. You're either British, French, German, Danish. You're not white, just like we're not black. You know what I mean? We're either somewhere from somewhere from Africa, somewhere from the Caribbeans. You know what I mean? Like we have roots somewhere, but you have to start by caring. Stop doing this little fake rainbow with no colors on it. I don't see color. Your intention is, I won't even say that your intention is good. Your intention is so past the point of shallow when you say something like that, because I just feel like that's just a blanket way of just deflecting any issue of even addressing that this person looks different. There's a concept that a lot of people have, generally speaking, white people have, that if someone else has, then it takes away from them. And they got to get over that, because that's not the way that it is. We can all have, you know what I mean? And just because we all have doesn't mean that, on Sunday night, you better have a space for my black face on your table. No, that's not what it means. Don't worry. I'm not trying to come to your house. I only want to come to your house if you want me to come to your house. And I only will invite you to my house if I get to know you enough and I'm comfortable with you and invite you into my house. You know what I mean? So they got to get out of this fear that in order for other people to have, that it takes away from them, My quality goals for my kids in the future, going forward, would definitely just be for them to be able to have some peace, have some respect, just nothing more than you would give anybody else. Treat it with respect, just as they give respect to others as they go out. They're all loving kids, respectful kids, contributing members of society, well-rounded. We live in America. We love America. But we just want America to love us back. Like, our blood does run through the soil, Native and African American. Well, for those who don't believe racism exists, you will never know that racism exists because you don't experience racism. But just because you don't experience it, you really have to understand that just because you don't experience it does not mean that it doesn't exist. And for anybody that really cares, would you have to make a choice to care? Just like going back to my faith, it's a choice. We have free will, and just as we have free will, there's no way me as a believer will not and cannot extend that same opportunity to you to have free will, whether to care or not care. It's up to you. You have to choose whether you want to care. But if you do choose that you do care and you want to work towards some ideal of racial reconciliation, I definitely have one book that I would recommend, and it's a book that I've been reading called White Awake, and by Daniel Hill. It is looking at the issue from a spiritual perspective, because that is what I honestly feel is going to be the answer, bottom line. I've read a lot of books from like Black authors talking on the topic from a spiritual perspective and from a worldly perspective on dealing with these issues, because I like to try to get a well-rounded perspective. I don't want to just go all church or all world. I want to know both, and then that helps me form my own opinion. But what's really awesome is this is a white pastor that's dealing with racial reconciliation from a white person's perspective to help white people understand. Just understand. And you may not even agree with everything that he says, but like I said, like I was saying, it starts by caring. You have to care.